What is retrading? Hey everyone, welcome to this week's video. Today we're going to be talking about a bit of a sore subject in commercial real estate, which is retrading. So what is it? What situations does it apply to? And how can you avoid buyers that retrade or avoid being a retrader yourself? So a lot of people have heard of this term. I'd say for the most part, newer investors don't exactly know what scenario constitutes retrading or not. I like to, some people call retrading a blanket statement for renegotiating any kind of deal. But effectively, what it is once you get a property under contract, the buyer at some point then goes and tries to get a price reduction. Now, depending on definition of retrading, it comes down to whether it's a legitimate ask for a price reduction or whether it's illegitimate and it's just seen as a bit of a money grab. So, retrading has a lot of consequences to it, especially to the buyer, but also the seller. The seller is expecting a certain price, and in recent years, you've actually had multiple bidder situations. So, you can imagine if you're a seller and you've listed your property for $5 million and you've got multiple offers all above list price. You got one at 5.1, 5.15, 5.25, and you have another one at 5.3. You end up going for that 5.3 offer. You get it under contract, you sign the contract with them. They come back in a couple of weeks and say, hey, I need to do this deal at 5.1. Well, as a seller, you can either decide to rip up the contract and say, no, our price was 5.3. Or you say, hey, I've already thought this thing is going to be sold. I've already found a property to 1031 into it. I'm just going to eat it and take the 5.1. You can see how that's not a great situation for a seller. He could have easily just taken the 5.25 offer and he would have been in a lot better shape. He would have closed for more money. So retrading, causes some angst in transactions, and you don't want to become known as a retrader. If you get that label, even by doing one retrade deal as a buyer, that reputation is going to follow you around, and the commercial real estate community is a small world, and people will know that you retraded on a deal. People aren't going to want to deal with you in the future. Having said that, people still do it. It's still very common in the commercial real estate transaction world. But really, you have to distinguish between what I call a renegotiation and a retrade. Retrade is definitely negative. A renegotiation is, in my view, legitimate. And there are legitimate reasons where you can get a property under contract for one price and then ask for a lower price later on. So, what are those differences? Well, for me, going through the inspection phases, getting an inspection done, that is going to unravel some things that may have been hidden to you that could reasonably expected to be found during the initial walkthrough phase. So for instance, when you're doing a walkthrough of a property, you're typically not going to go on the roof unless it's easy access and you're going to you're going to have the means to do that. But typically, you're not going to see the roof until an inspector comes out after the contract is signed and they inspect it. Now, if the seller has told you and the seller's broker has told you, yeah, the roof is brand new, it just got done a couple of years ago, and then you go, you get it under contract, you do the inspection, you realize, hey, this roof is actually 20 years old, there's a lot of leaks on it, you'd be well within your right to go to the seller and say, hey, what's going on here? I'm not going to continue on this deal unless we get a credit for the roof or a price reduction. That, in my opinion, would be a valid reason to renegotiate the price. And some people may call that retrading as well. But I kind of leave retrading specifically for those cases where they're illegitimate. So what would an illegitimate retrade look like? Well, I'll give you a real example that I heard from a broker recently. he was selling a 44 unit apartment building. The seller was distressed. They needed someone to come in and be sure of the closing. And so they received a range of offers between 4 million and 5.25 million. They ended up going with the offer at $4.5 million, which wasn't the highest offer, but it seemed the most legitimate offer from a source who owned property in the area, so they knew was likely going to be able to close on the transaction. So they went under contract at 4.5. The buyer did their inspection, the due diligence period closed. Right until closing day, the buyer came back and said, hey, I want $50,000 off the purchase price because of something that came up in the inspection. Now, this is already way too late. The inspection period had closed. The earnest money had gone hard, but they knew the seller was in such a desperate situation that they pretty much had to close. They had no choice but to close. They had the bank breathing down their neck. And so even though everyone was furious, the brokers, the attorneys, the lenders, everyone, the seller really had no choice. And they end up having to give that 50K discount, even though it was kind of a bogus excuse. But what does that do to the buyer? The buyer ended up getting 50K extra, so good for him. But in speaking with this agent afterwards, he said, hey, I'm never going to be doing business with this buyer again. And if I represent a seller and this buyer comes to buy it, of course, I'll present the offer. But I'm going to strongly recommend that they don't accept it because they're likely to get retraded upon. So that was a kind of a good story, an anecdote of what a retrader looks like and how it can actually benefit the buyer in the short term. But if you are looking to do more than one deal in the future, it's really going to hurt you and people aren't going to want to do business with you if you've gained that reputation of being a retrader. And that's definitely an illegitimate, I don't actually know the specifics of what was asked for in that, but it had something to do with the inspection. And the fact that the inspection was done weeks ago and they were at closing day, the timing was simply too late. Maybe it was an actual concern about the inspection, but it needed to be brought up much, much earlier. So what are some of the scenarios that you can offset? And remember, the term retrading can be subjective. The buyer could see it as a renegotiation and the seller could see it as retrading. So regardless of what the truth is, you want to avoid even the perception of retrading being there or you being branded a retrader. So what are some things that you can do to offset it? First of all, make sure that you spell everything out on the front end. Even if it's not necessarily in the contract, you can relay concerns to the broker or directly to the seller and say, hey, here's my price, but it's contingent upon me being able to see the condition of the roof, for instance, and ensure that it is actually in new condition. If you spell that out at the front end and then at the back end, you bring that up because it wasn't matching what you expected, that's completely fine. So you can offset a lot of these by mentioning them up front, or if not up front, early on while you're doing the inspection. Let everyone know early that, hey, this hasn't matched what you were expecting. And you can actually kind of not even get away with it, but you can keep everyone at ease. The absolute worst time to retrade is at the closing table or the day before, because everyone's already set, everyone's already put things in place, expecting it for this deal to close. And if you don't end up closing, and you pull an 11th hour bait and switch, then you're going to upset a lot of people. So that's the main thing. Let it be known up front. If there are variables that are unknown at the start, but you want to get the deal under contract just so you can lock it up, that's fine. Just spell it out. Say, hey, here is my offer, but it's contingent on the property being fully leased, or the units being at a certain rent, or the roof being in this condition, the HVAC being in this condition. So you can offset a lot of these potential uh, fears up front, which may prevent you from putting in an offer. But this really says, hey, you've got good intentions. You're really looking to close this, and you're not looking to try and renegotiate the price after the fact. So you want to keep that in mind. I'll say that where you see nefarious uses of retrading is like in the example I mentioned before, where maybe you have a competitive property and someone is bidding up the property just to get it, but they don't really want it at that price, but they're just trying to get rid of all the other competition. They'll get it under contract, they'll drag it out, and then they'll ask for a price reduction to the price they actually do want to do. And they've kind of screwed over the seller, for lack of a better phrase, in that regard. They had no intention of closing at that higher price. And those are some of the worst people in the industry. And those kind of become, they're like lepers in the industry. They get known for that reputation of retrading. So you definitely want to avoid any labels that could negatively impact you in the future, like retrading. And it's not a legitimate strategy. I think those people who retrade might get a quick gain, a short-term gain from it if they are able to force it through, but almost always it's going to hurt them in the long run. So that's all we have time for today. That's on retrading. We'll see you in the next video.